the kente cloth got wrapped around it during Kwanzaa last year. And so we just left it there because it tells the story. The artist originally put, "I am free." And it really upset a lot of community members because they felt like it was insensitive to the movement. And so someone tagged it and put "not free." Because it was the whole conversation around an open hand versus a closed fist. There are people who were extremely upset. I loved it because it caused so much controversy in a protest. It like disrupted the protesters. Yeah. And so it's like a disruption of the disruptors. To really think about like, what are we here for? Like, what are we standing for? What are we fighting for? What are we looking into our hope? What does life look like on the other side of justice?
Excited once again to do another one of these great interviews as we reflect on the history of the Pinnell Center. And so today I get to hear from my dear friend, my dear sister, Jeanelle Austin. So let's talk about your time entering into Fuller, matriculating through your degree, and then ultimately serving as director of the Pinnell Center for a brief time.
I went through the MA in Intercultural Studies program, graduated in 2009 when the economic crash was happening, and Fuller was offering me a job as an academic advisor. Mm-hmm. Mama didn't raise no fool. I took the job.
Of course.
And 2 years turned into 5 years, turned into 7 years. But at that time—
I didn't know you were an advisor that long.
I was an advisor that long.
Okay.
But during that time, I was working on my MDiv at night.
How many other Black advisors, academic advisors, were there?
None.
Okay.
It was me.
Okay.
Or at least in the master's program for intercultural studies and theology.
Right. Yours was the face for them, for many of those.
Yes.
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. Yours was the face for many of those students.
Thank you.
For many of those students that came into Fuller during that time. And there was so much turnover during that time in that department specifically.
Absolutely.
And there were so many people that were new and didn't know a lot of the nuances.
Absolutely.
So yours was the face for students of the African diaspora, for students who were marginalized, who felt that you were an advocate for them in that department for
Absolutely.
years.
And you know what's so fascinating, what got me into the Pinnell Center was actually the students. I remember I went to brunch. It was a student's birthday.
Okay.
And we had brunch. It was just all females, all Black women.
Yeah.
And they looked up and they said to me, they're like, "Jeanelle, you should direct the Pinnell Center." And suddenly there was an announcement that the Pinnell Center was being restructured to include a director of operations position. And my phone blew up. Like everybody and their mom was calling me and saying, "Jeanelle, you have to apply. You have to apply." And so I applied and I went through the process like anybody else. And I remember during my second interview, I literally cried. Like I was so emotional about the idea of serving Black students and serving the Black church in this way. And so when they selected me, it felt like a breath of fresh air. One, I got out of academic advising, which I only promised 2 years and gave 7.
Yes.
But two, I got to serve Black students, right? I got to serve the Black church. It was an opportunity for me to be able to get outside of Fuller and help build bridges where bridges had been burned. Because I heard so many stories of burned bridges in the community. And so I learned that half the battle is showing up. So I would just start showing up. I would show up to funerals. I would show up to church services and celebrations and protests. And wherever it was that I could show up to be a bridge between Fuller and the community, I showed up. I'm actually glad that we're starting on the South Side because I always start people with Murphy Ranks Memorial.
Okay.
Murphy was murdered on June 19th, 2020, on Juneteenth.
Oh my God.
And the community witnessed a homicide, and the police called it a self-inflicted wound. And his widow is still waiting for a completed investigation, almost 18 months later.
Oh my God.
So this is where his car was. They never claimed it as evidence. So his car was just sitting here. And this is where the community holds space. We have this rule that whenever the city puts something down, we paint.
Oh, as a sign of protesting.
Yeah, I was like, we claim it through art. Across the way, Hardell Sherrill with the blue.
Yeah.
He was murdered in prison through neglect, medical care neglect. And then Paul Castaway was mentally ill and murdered by the police in Colorado, and his family's here in Minnesota. This memorial here on the ground is to Squiggs. He died of a drug overdose.
Okay.
So it's important for us to talk about all forms of anti-Blackness.
Yeah.
This is Timez Wright, who was murdered interpersonal violence 2 days before the trial of Derek Chauvin began. When Dante Wright was murdered, during the trial of Derek Chauvin, one of our community members, she knew the mother of his son, and she went out to protest, and she was so angry, she came back, and all her emotions just wrote this on the ground, and this has become the area where we tribute Dante Wright. But this is a place where George Floyd took his last breath, namely
Jesus.
there. I will never forget when Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were murdered in the beginning of July of 2016. And I had told myself that I needed to watch the videos to see what it was that everyone was talking about. And I watched the videos, and the tears could not stop. I brushed my teeth, crying, weeping, the whole way to work, crying, weeping, and the whole way to work was a whole mile. Crying, weeping.
Yeah.
And then I parked my car and I said, okay, Jeanelle, now you have to be strong for the students. And so I had to pull myself together, and I get to work, my inbox is full, my phone's blowing off the hook.
Yeah.
I had one student call me and said, Jeanelle, I'm sitting in Greek. I can't study Greek. And I said, come meet me. And so we met at a table outside and just talked and processed, because being Black in America was weighing heavy on us. I think that it was a privilege and an honor to be present with and for students. I tried my best in the building of the Pennell Center to create sacred space where students could come and be. Just having a space where Black students can come and just breathe, right? In a world where we can't breathe. And in a church that many times suffocates us. Going to classes where there's white thought everywhere and you don't necessarily see yourself reflected in the curriculum or in the teaching or in your peers. In a world where we can't breathe, there was a place where we could go that would be open for us.
Yeah.
And that was my goal, is to provide a place where students can go and they could find home away from home. We built the greenhouse because so many people were leaving potted plants as offerings. So then we commissioned theater artists who are out of work because of COVID to build custom planters, and then we had youth paint them. Everything is somebody's offering, and therefore nothing is thrown away. So we do our best to even preserve the plants, and when they die, we just compost them, so that way they continue to give life.
There you go.
People would come in here just to take a mental health break. Like, it really served as a space for people to just breathe. I remember this one little girl came in here and she was like, "It smells like spring."
Wow.
So.
Wow. Yeah.
It's amazing the life it gives. The Black Pastors Program was revolutionary for its time. And
1972.
It was necessary. 1972, like context again, right? We're
1972.
just coming off of the Civil Rights Movement. Leaders were jailed and assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of tension in this country.
Yes.
And that's also why I think Bill Pannell was a gift, being who he was in that time when he came. Like, Bill Pannell knew what it meant to be Black in America, but he also knew what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. He also knew what it meant to break barriers and boundaries and create opportunities and trailblaze. And the fact that he had such a big heart for Black pastors, to say that they deserve seminary education too, that they deserve an equal seat at the table.
And that they can do the work too.
And they can do the work. They're smart, they're intelligent.
It's not crumbs that you're giving to, no, they can sit at the table and do the work.
They can do it. You just have to give them options and an opportunity. The Black church is so rich of tradition and culture, and this center and thought.
Yes.
And this center was necessary so we could bring all of who we are to seminary.
Yes.
Like,
and not just to carve out a little corner for us, but for us to actually infiltrate and to be that yeast, that leaven in the entire seminary.
And let's actually admit that evangelicalism is a branch of Christianity that is hostile for Black folks. And yet there are still Black evangelicals who find their way to figure out who is Jesus in the midst of the toxicity. Anyways, and they're not willing to give up their belief in what it means to be an evangelical and their belief in what it means to be Black in America. And they figured out a way to navigate both worlds and uphold that.
When we talk about trailblazers, we always put them on this pedestal, like these are the trailblazers. What we don't see is that we don't see the scars. Because the trailblazer walks through the thicket first, walks through the vines and the where there is no trail first. They've got to beat down all of the weeds and cut back and take all of the licks so that the people coming behind them can actually see a path.
It's the reality of scars.
Yeah.
And people don't see those things.
They don't.
It's like they see these amazing hands, but they don't see the rugged feet. When we get to this corner, we're going to take a left, and what you're going to see in the distance is what is called the Say Their Names Memorial. It was done by 2 college students out of Penn State. They flew in during the uprising, they installed it, and then they bounced. What's so fascinating about this installation is that there are family and friends who actually treat it like a cemetery, and they will lay items down and they will pay respect. And there is a little over 200 names in this installation. Art is one of the most powerful forms of protest. We say the earth protests with us and God is on our side. That's the only way we've made it thus far.